Hey everyone, welcome to What's on My Bookshelf. So today I was thinking of giving my thoughts on the two books that are very popular by a popular author, Madeline Miller. Now I must say the first time I read The Song of Achilles, I was not, I wouldn't say, I was not blown away, but I did like her writing and that's what kept me reading the book. And the other book, Circe, again by the same author, Madeline Miller. I read it this year because it has been on my TBR for the longest time. In fact, for 3 years. I had both these books for 3 years. I bought them towards the end of 2019 and I read them only this year. I think I read Song of Achilles in the first half of 2022 and Circe, I just finished reading it. And I feel so guilty that I didn't read this book so long ago, even though I had this with me sitting on my shelf right in front of my eyes. I had this with me for 3 years and I decided not to read it. I loved reading Circe. I'm like, now I just want to keep reading this author's work now. That's what I keep thinking. While I read the Song of Achilles, again, I have heard of this book. I mean, not the book, but this mythology, the Odysseus. I've heard of it. I know the story of Troy, the Trojan War, then about Achilles. Of course, I was not very well versed with Patroclus, but I've heard of it. I know he attained his fame during this war and he did not live long. But I did not know Patroclus was his lover, because the movie that I saw starring Brad Pitt, that movie I think came in 2004, that movie, it showed Patroclus as his cousin, if I'm not mistaken, and that he, in his innocence, to prove that he is also no less than a hero, decided to go and fight for Achilles and was killed. And this made him angry, and in turn, everything that did happen in that book. I mean, in that movie, as the myth itself is. But in this book, it's when I realized, okay, they both are lovers, and there is a huge, I wouldn't say conspiracy necessarily, but that it's something that is hidden, that Achilles was kind of gay. So that was probably the only information that was kind of new to me. Nevertheless, when I was reading this book, I must admit I was very bored. But it's not the fault, I wouldn't say it's the fault of the writer. It's just the time period it's set in. It's just a very different time period, right? And time doesn't fly as quickly as it does in today's era. Everything is slow there. People are not in a hurry as such. Though only some people, some heroes are destined to do certain things and they are treated like gods and stuff. And of course, Achilles is part god, or at least he was the son of a minor goddess. So in that point, for him, everything comes naturally and easily. But for Patroclus, saying this story through his point of view was absolutely beautiful. And yes, I have read many people saying they cried reading this book and that it was very sad ending. And yes, I did choke up in the end. It was very sad. It felt so heartbreaking to read it, for sure. How Patroclus, spoilers, dies, and even in the underworld, he's still waiting to be united with Achilles. I mean, the way the writer has written this, it's pure gold. I've not come across a writer who writes this beautifully other than Catherine Arden, the Winter Night Trilogy's author. Her prose is really amazing. So I loved her writing, and to find somebody like her was really exciting for me. So imagine my excitement at reading Circe. Now I must say that I find it difficult to believe that this book has more ratings than this one. This one has 4.123 something on Goodreads, but this one has 4.26, if I'm not mistaken, last I checked, on Goodreads. Like, this one seems to be the masterpiece for me. Now I won't consider myself a feminist, because despite believing in equality, there are many things I would say that, as growing up and as after becoming a parent, that are far more different than what a feminist ideology would be. So in terms of feminism and all, I don't know what the book is trying to capture here, but the story of Circe, for me as a reader, was so immersive. It captivated me to no end. Once I started reading it, I couldn't stop reading it. I just wanted to continue reading it on and on and on. And for me, that experience as a reader is what's the most important. I had that experience with House of Hollows also last month. That once you start reading it, you just can't stop. That's the most exciting part for a reader. And this one, surprisingly, Circe is so full of, it's not suspense, but it pulls you in so badly, even though there is nothing much happening as such. When you look at it chapter by chapter, maybe nothing is happening, but the way the author has written her point of view, Circe's point of view, like Circe is Circe's point of view, and Song of Achilles is Patroclus' point of view, and the way her point of view has been written, you cannot stop reading it. I'm amazed at the author's ability to do that. Now again, Circe is also a minor goddess. She doesn't know what she's the god of till like around 10,000 years pass by the time she realizes that she also has some godly powers, because she has been kind of rebuked, for a better word, in the Titans award. She's not considered important, and she's considered weird because she has a different voice, which turns out to be human voice, what gods hear when they hear humans speak. So it just turned out that she has human voice, that's all. So she is a minor goddess, but her relatives, so to say, they are not interested in her because she's not powerful like her father Helios, in the house of Helios, and Helios is the sun god, and she is one of his kids, and she doesn't turn out to be very powerful. And her mother is Perse, a nymph. Even her other kids, there are 4 of them. She's one of the 4. She's the eldest, and then they have another 2 twins, and then another child, 2 boys, 2 girls, like that. Now don't ask me the name right now, I don't remember, but I'll be uploading it here. And she finds herself to be isolated, alone, and nobody really wants to be associated with her, seen with her, because she's not considered powerful. She's like a pariah in her own family, but they all tolerate her because she is the child of Helios, and nobody is going to cross him anyways, because even though he himself doesn't bother about her, hurting one of his kids is equal to hurting him or insulting him, and that will cause you problems. So nobody bothers to really, there's some minor bullying will be there, that's it, but nothing else. And so she's protected in those ways. But 10,000 years pass by, and she is, for some reason, I don't know if I should say it, she falls in love with a human. She falls in love with a supposed human who she does some witchcraft with. She doesn't realize she's doing the witchcraft, and then he turns into a god. He turns into some other creature and turns into a god. And then that person, when he was in his human form, was very much in love with her, really was happy to see her. But once he was transformed and became a god, he was not at all bothered with her after that. So she turns his lover, one of his lovers, into a really big sea monster. Like, she really curses her in the biggest way possible, and she's banished from the house of Helios, so to say, and is punished to live in isolation on the island of Aya. And there onwards, she starts discovering herself. She realizes she has this witchcraft, this power that she can cultivate for herself, and come into her. And I remember thinking, as I started reading this book, my God, why are you like this? Stand up for yourself, don't let anybody push you. And as I kept reading, I can see her progress. At first it was a little difficult to accept it, that she is transforming, but the fact that she did transform, she did become empowered, she became so much more, she came into her own, and isolation is what that did to her. Not living among her own people, not living among the gods, for the God's sake. So that didn't do that, but living in isolation led her to discover herself, and she became a really powerful witch. There was nothing the gods could do to her. That island had her stamp on it, so she was very powerful. And then she goes on these adventures. They're all far and in between. She meets Daedalus, then she's there for the birth of Minotaur. So all these other Greek mythologies that we have seen and heard of are all intersphered in her journey and how she comes across these people, these creatures. And Odysseus himself, she meets him and he is one of her lovers, just like she is one of his lovers. And I kept thinking how it's possible for men in those times to continue to have lovers, even if they're married with kids, and it's all right for them to have lovers, and why it's not possible for the women to do that. Probably it's possible, I must have missed it, but it's considered okay also for them to just have an affair and go out with anybody they want to. And I think I find Greek mythology to be fascinating. I sometimes don't even believe that we are reading about gods, and how rich these Greeks were, that they could write such kind of mythologies, such kind of poems, stories. It's so human in so many levels, but magnified tenfold. And it's fascinating no matter how much you read upon Greek mythology. And I must say, I've not done that enough. I have read here and there, I've had my share of stories here and there, but I've never really gone in depth into it, which I feel like I must do by now, because I have not really researched everything that has gone on in this book. And in fact, I've never heard of the name Circe before. This was the first time I read about her. I went in blind. I had no idea what I'm reading. I just went in blind, and of course the first line hooks you. I mean, there is nothing more than the first chapter that hooks you. Listen to this. When I was born, the name for what I was did not exist. They called me a nymph, assuming I would be like my mother and aunts and 1,000 cousins. And it just turned out that she was just someone who was more on the human side. And there are so many parts in this book that was so heart-wrenching for me. And it's especially different after you become a parent, how you connect to characters which you wouldn't have connected to otherwise. Some of the place where it felt so raw for me was when her son decides to follow Athena and have his own kingdom. That's something that stood out very raw to me. And she has I'm not sure, Telegonus or Telemachus, which one of them it was, and Odysseus' wife. They decide to stay back, and she thinks how she has lived for so long and she will continue to live for so long, but all the people that she loves, even if these people hang behind, they will become part of the soil again. Even her son, who has decided to go away, he will also be a part of the soil again, and she will just continue to exist without anything to hold on to. And she is a god, and this is how she feels like that. And then she decides to call on to her father, and that conversation between them was so powerful and so raw and so heart touching. Its words fail to describe what I felt when I was reading those parts. Everything else is very adventurous. It has its own humor, it has its own connections, things that you connect with. But that part was so difficult for me to read that part, because ultimately when we are sad, when we feel helpless, when we feel like we need somebody, the first person that we think of is our parents. And for her, it was her father Helios. But the conversation, the way he spoke to her, despite thousands of years of exile, and he still says, "Don't dishonor my name." And then she replies back, "Do me a favor, when you count your children, leave me out of them." And I was so impressed by her. I was like, you can read the literal character growth that Circe goes through. It's such a coming of age story, even though it's about a goddess, and she had the luxury to take like thousands of years. But it's so needed, and so and how you connect with that character, even though what really do you have in common with somebody like that? That's magnificent writing, and I'm so impressed. I believe she has written another book also, and I forget the name. Again, inspired by Greek mythology, and I'm really interested in checking it out. It doesn't have great ratings, if I'm not mistaken, which is kind of disappointing because such a brilliant author, why wouldn't? I mean, these two books are masterpieces, and I cannot wait to read more books from her. And the best part is that she writes about Greek myths, and I love it. I think Greek mythology, in whichever way the writers or the authors write it, in whichever way, whichever story it is, connects the most to you. There are many stories people write, like fantasy, high fantasy, thrillers. There are so many genres, but they don't connect to you on an emotional level. I mean, this is my opinion, of course. At least for me, everything is very, you read it and there is a momentary kind of a excitement feeling, but then once you finish the book, it's over. But Greek mythology and books written inspired by those, they have a way to stay with you after a very long time, even after you finish reading it, and it makes you think, it makes you feel, it makes you question, it makes you ponder, and it's so amazing this that this exists and we get to read about it and experience it. And I'm so glad that this author chose to write these two books. I mean, the only problem I had with Song of Achilles is that it's slow and a little boring in parts, little dull in parts here and there. But again, as I said, it's not the fault of the author for it. The time period is such, and all the things that happens in Song of Achilles is so sometimes so weird. Like, even the females in that period, they're okay being, of course, I guess they didn't have a choice, but the way women are portrayed, it's so, I can't believe that we were once upon a time subject to such kind of treatments. And the gods themselves, they're just like humans but with powers. How they have these, how they are still insecure, jealous, envy, they go through all these gamut of emotions, and it's fascinating to read it. So this is what I felt about this book, Circe and Song of Achilles. Have you read it? I mean, I think I'm the only person who has not read Circe. I'm sure you all must have read it. If you have read it, do tell me, what did you think about this book? What was your favorite part and your codes? What made you want to keep reading this? Because I do think some people have given it less than 5 stars. This is in fact my only 5-star read for this year. Even Song of Achilles, I think I've given it only 3.5 if I'm not mistaken. You can't really give 3.5 on Goodreads. You can only give 3, 4, which I really hate about Goodreads sometimes. I cannot stop gushing about this book. So I'm going to stop my video here, and I'm glad I was able to kind of talk out loud about this book. And yeah, please do subscribe to my channel and like this video. I will catch you in another video where I am talking about my November reads probably. I just wanted to quickly share my thoughts on Circe and a little bit about Song of Achilles. So yeah, I'll stop here and see you in my next video. Thank you and bye.